There's a reason that we were called the standard of the world. We are a company really built on innovation. We're 122 years old this year, and there's a reason that we're still here and we're here the way that we are. We're the first electric starter. We're the first reusable parts. We were the first with OnStar. I mean, if you go through our history, there's constant innovation. If you look at Lyric right now, we have outsold, minus Tesla and Rivian, but if you talk about like the traditional competitors, we've outsold all of them combined in EVs the past several months. So I think, we're feeling good about where we are, and we're ready for whatever the consumer growth curve is, whether it's, back up as fast as it was, or it's on this very positive trajectory that it's on now. We all know that people aren't watching TV as much as or the same way as they used to. So when we look at how do we market a vehicle, when we have the best success, it's when we have a very multifaceted plan that really speaks to people in ways that are important to them, or that they again, how they want to resonate with us. Hello, this is Melissa Grady Diaz, and I'm here on Cars and Culture with Jason Stein.
It's wonderful to have a marketer on the program. We've had a long history of great marketers on the program, and it's special to have Melissa today because she's a new mom. So congratulations right out of the gate of you just had a baby, correct?
I did. His name is Jaden, and he's 8.5 months old now. I can't believe it. Time is flying. I'm every cliche.
Is Jaden your first?
He is my first, yes.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. So you've had a good 8.5 months of sleep, clearly. You've been working a lot then.
Oh, it's funny. I sort of remember what sleep is. I don't know.
Yeah, right. Well, congratulations again. We're going to get into cars and we'll get into Lyric and all kinds of other announcements that you have today. It should not be lost that you started this role at the probably the most difficult time that you possibly could start a role like this, right? How hard was that for you to dig into not only this place in automotive, but the role that you were taking at the time you were taking it at?
Yeah, it's very interesting looking back. I think the beginning of the role, it was a very exciting time because we were coming into a product renaissance, and it was like the world was our oyster. And within a few months, 5 months in, the pandemic was really starting to show how bad it was going to be. And I think, trying to navigate the brand was one thing. Trying to navigate with people was really hard. What does this mean for the safety of all of our families? What does this mean for our jobs? What does this mean for our partners that we work with? So I think that was such an interesting thing to try to work through, and to just, it's crazy when we think back, right? Because our factory shut down and we started making ventilators. And that's such a blip in the past now, and something that's so behind us, but we quickly shifted. I think there was a lot within GM that it was amazing to see people band together, and the things, how do we take care of our customers? And we quickly, stopped marketing anything that had to do with, launch vehicles. We had sedans coming out. We stopped all of that. We put together programs that helped first responders and, people who still had to be commuting, medical workers. We helped our teams and their families as they were navigating staying home and staying safe. And we shifted to making ventilators, and it was a very difficult time. I just remember those first couple of weeks feeling like months or years, and every day, how are we going to manage this crisis? Is everyone okay? being kind of the first question that we had. I myself got COVID very early. And I just remember the sort of the panic you feel when it's your own family and you don't know what's going on and trying to keep leading the team. So it was definitely a time where I grew a lot. I got a lot of perspective. You're just reminded a lot of what it means to be human.
And for you personally, I mean, you when you took this position, you moved back to New York City, right? You gave up almost all of your belongings. You had downsized from a 4-story Lincoln Park townhouse in Chicago. You moved to a small Manhattan apartment, dove into your new life, and then this situation happens.
I actually moved back to New York in 2013. So it was a little before this role. I was going to MetLife at the time, and that's when I completely downsized and I gave up. That was another thing. I think you live your adult life collecting all these things, creating a home. And when I moved to New York, I started over. I moved a couple suitcases. I checked my plates and silverware and pots and pans in a suitcase and I bought a bed and started fresh. And then I was working. So shortly thereafter, I guess like probably 5 years into my time in New York, I took the role at Cadillac in New York. And shortly after I took this role, they announced the move back to Detroit. So I actually, in a very similar fashion, packed everything up and got an apartment in Birmingham, Michigan, which is a suburb of Detroit. And I was living there away from my then boyfriend, now husband, and just sort of in this series of starting over moments. So I was living in Michigan and coming back to New York when the pandemic hit. And when the pandemic first hit, I actually went to Chicago with my family. They were in the suburbs. And so my husband and I were there in the suburbs of Chicago, sequestering. And then it was sort of mid-pandemic, about a year later, when we bought our house in New York because we were all remotely working then. We actually also have a couple places in the Poconos, which we acquired during the pandemic. And we were hanging out there for a while, just sitting in nature and away from people for the early part.
Let's talk about your career, which is an interesting one, but I'll go all the way back to second grade. So I read that you used to stage plays with commercial breaks in them. I mean, if you're not born to be a marketer at that age, I don't know when you are.
It's a
Is
very
that true?
interesting thing. It's true. It's true. And I've like tried to peel back the layers on this one because it's so interesting. I always knew I wanted to be in advertising. And I remember my grandpa saying, "Are you sure you don't want to be a teacher?" But funny enough, that was my dad's dad. My mom's dad was actually in advertising too, which I didn't understand at the time. He was a photographer and a very creative guy. And that creative part was very interesting to me. But I used to yes, have plays with commercial breaks. I remember one rather pithy, deep one where I was talking about selling ice to an Eskimo.
Yeah,
there
perfect.
there was an igloo in there, and I remember watching Who's the Boss, and thinking I wanted to be like Angela with her big New York advertising job. Yeah, it's funny. Dreams of a little girl. Here I am living my dream.
You are, but you're a data person at heart. I mean, you've done a number of different things related to either database creation or analytics. You started your own company, mybluefeather.com, which I want to talk about a little bit. But a data person who becomes a marketer, that's a little left brain, right brain, isn't it?
I'm definitely exactly where the left and the right brain meet. I have and maybe the expansion on both sides because I love the data technology side of things and I really love the creative. And if I don't have both those things, I'm not really in as happy a place. And it's interesting because I coming into college, I knew that I wanted to be in advertising, right? And I don't know that I fully knew exactly what that meant. And my junior year, maybe it was my sophomore year, I can't remember now. Finally had enough credits to go into my first advertising class. And I walked up to my teacher and I remember, my palms sweating, my heart pounding. I went up to the teacher and I said, I want to be in advertising. If you could help me, this is what I want to do. And she did. She kind of, talked me through some of the areas that I needed to develop on. And after the class, she said, there's a program at Northwestern that is very forward on advertising. It's a graduate school program. I think you'd be great for it. You should apply. And I remember very quickly, there was a GMAT coming in like a week or two, and I just signed up for it, didn't practice, took the GMAT, applied, and got in. And when I was going into the program, there were different tracks, and there was advertising, there was PR, and there was like database direct e-commerce, like the direct marketing skills. And I intended to go into advertising. And about a week and a half before the program started, I had a mentor who was supposed to be, show me where the computer lab was, because in those days we all sat in a computer lab, show me where like the vending machines were, help welcome me onto campus. And he asked me a question that really ended up shaping my career. Now, maybe had I gone in the program, I would have figured this out. But he asked me, do you like math? And I do really like math. My dad was, in like IT and computer science. He was a vice president at what is now Chase, running IT. My brother's an engineer. That we have that kind of, I knew that wasn't where I was. And I was like, I like math. And he said, well, there's this whole new type, this was a long time ago. There's this whole new type of marketing coming up. And that is direct marketing that is very data and technology based. And if you're interested in it, if you learn those skills now, you'll have them. You can still do advertising if you want, but it's very specific and new. So if you want to learn those skills, that's going to, put you in a different track. And sure enough, I did. I switched my major and I absolutely fell in love with statistics. I, I can talk about different
Not
methodologies.
many people have said that.
I know it, you know what? And it's okay. Like, it's okay to be a geek. It's okay to be a nerd. That's what I've learned. And I really I used to stay after class and I learned how to program in SAS. I did my summer residency while people were working on big brands. I was at a company called InfoWorks that built models, and I built models for H&R Block. And to me, it was amazing. Like, and this just shows what a nerd I am, but that I am doing exactly the right job. It was absolutely amazing to me that I could figure out how to optimize offers across groups of people to understand what they'd respond to and create incremental revenue and value. Like, that was just like, to me, if we had emojis then, I would have been the mind blown emoji. It was so fascinating how it works. And then when you pull in the softer sides of marketing, when you pull in the psychology, the understanding what drives human beings, and you pair that with data, start to understand how to predict those things, and then really show up and have unique interactions with people, to me, it's such an amazing, beautiful thing. I love it. And, I love the art of marketing. I love the fact that brands create experiences and play a part in people's lives. I love that when it's done right, people love advertising. They love when brands entertain them. I mean, I use the very easy example of the Super Bowl all the time. We can talk about people not wanting ad-supported platforms or not wanting advertising, but when we're doing our jobs right, people love it. I mean, now if you look at the new way people are marketing and you look at influencers, and when we find people, and we don't just go pay someone to talk about our product, we find people who truly love our products and we partner with them. And it helps to tell our story, and people want to hear the story from people that they like. I mean, if you look at like where you really see that, well, two places, like the beauty industry, you see that a lot. People want to understand, wow, you look great. How are you doing that? As a new mom, I love hearing from, other either new moms or moms who've been around the block, like, how did you do this? And my social usage now is through the roof compared to before because I'm just learning in all these communities. And so I think, when you look at the craft, and I know, I'm sitting here talking about how I love data, statistics, and different kinds of marketing, but I really do love it. I'm absolutely in the right career doing the right thing.
You were ahead of yourself with mybluefeather.com. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that was really fun. I've actually twice started randomly twice I've started jewelry companies, and I wouldn't say that jewelry is a big passion for me. Um, Although I do really love helping people get things that they love, I guess would be the theme there. So early on, I've always loved e-commerce, and I told you I was building regression models. I'm a very hands-on person. I also like to build websites. I like to learn how to do different things. And so early on, a friend of mine and my grandmother decided we wanted to start a business. And eventually, my grandma wanted us to get into clothing, but we all decided to start with jewelry and accessories. So the three of us started a very cute website. It was called My Blue Feather. It was called that. This is very funny. I don't know that I've told this story before, but my grandma, who used to have a very large part in my plays, named herself Fartsy Dragon Feather. And so we were trying to get the name Dragon Feather for the company, but that wasn't working for a number of reasons. So we settled on My Blue Feather because blue was also all of our favorite color. Um, and it was so fun. I was living in LA at the time, and we used to go down to the fashion district and source all of our jewelry. And I built the website and wrote all the copy. And my partner and her husband, they did all of the photography. And between the two of us, we like were adding we had a lot of products actually. We added all the pages. So we were doing that for about a year, and then I got the job offer at Chiat Day. So I worked early in my career. I was in auto. I was at Jaguar Land Rover, and then I was doing this around the same time, and then took a little time off. Was doing this. My dad wasn't that well at the time, so I was taking a step back and focusing on this. And actually, we were doing pretty well pretty early for the time when e-commerce wasn't as easy to do yourself. And then Chiat Day came along and offered me a job as an account director working on the Infinity business. And I had really wanted to work at Chiat Day. Their offices had a park inside. There were trees. It was like just an incredible place, and the creativity, the energy there was great. So I sold my part of the business to my partner, and it still went on. I think for like 4 or 5 years, they kept it going. But it
So
was
this
it was fun.
Yeah, and by the way, Rob has been on this program. He was on a long time ago talking about the agency side of the business. But uh, let's talk a little bit about your second stint here in automotive now. So
Yeah.
why was Cadillac appealing to you? What was it that made it appealing?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Um, at that point when the opportunity was given to me, I the year before I had sat and done my meditation. I love to meditate. I'd done my meditation, kind of really thought, where do I want to be? What do I want to do with my life? You know how you sort of come to these intersection points, and I was at one. I tend to spend a lot of time in Arizona when I'm thinking through these things, and Sedona has like really good energy for me. And I was thinking through, what do I want to do? And I had actually thought that I was either going to start my own business in earnest this time and go down that route, or that I wanted to be CMO of a smaller e-commerce startup company, because I wanted to really own the whole ecosystem. I wanted to just, bring everything together that I love doing. And coming into GM, I was coming into the head of performance marketing role in Cadillac. I got promoted into the CMO role about a year later. Um, and the reason for it, because it's very different from where I was thinking about going, but the reason for it was that GM really wanted to fundamentally change the way they were going to market. And they wanted to do it in a more targeted way, in a more data-driven way, and backed by technology and fully measured, which is all of the things that
That's music to
appealed.
your ears.
Yeah, exactly. All of the things that appealed to me and were the things that made me want to go somewhere smaller. So the opportunity to be at a company like GM and have a role like that was just, I mean, there was no way I could have turned that down. And it's been incredible.
What was your impression of GM before you got to GM?
It's been very interesting because my impression of GM was very different of what GM is. I had been in automotive, as I said, early in my career, and the feeling in automotive and the way that automotive operated then, and I don't have, any purview into the other companies I was working with, but it was just a very different place. And so I was nervous coming into GM about what the culture was going to be and, how long I would want to be here and what it would be like. And I've been absolutely amazed. I've worked for Ford, I've worked for Motorola, I've worked for MetLife, I've worked for these really big companies. Of all of them, the culture at GM is probably so far the best culture that I've been in. Um, it's been very interesting when we want to put something through the organization, it really goes through. And let me give you an example of that because I think that this probably resonates to anyone who's been in the corporate world. When Mary became CEO, it was right around the ignition switch issue that she came in. And she said, we are going to be safety first. Like, this is not going to happen again. We're going to change our culture. And so I came in several years later, and safety is a huge, like when you survey our people, safety is always number one of things. We start all big meetings with a safety message. And it can be something that is work related because there was an incident. It could be something as simple as like, it's coming into holiday season, be careful when you're putting up your Christmas lights. Here's a story about what happened to me. Like, it's all these different safety messages and for instance, also, if you're walking along and looking at your cell phone, someone will tap you on the shoulder and say, that's against our culture. It's not safe. Coming into that, I feel like anywhere else that I had been, that would have been a flavor of the month. Oh, we've got the safety issue. We're doing all these things. And now we're going to do a safety message. I have come to love safety messages, and it's changed my thinking. So I now look at the world in a different way. This habit that we've built makes me look at the world in a different way. And, it's such an interesting thing to me to see something that could have easily been a flavor of the month, and now we're out of the news, we're safe, still ingrained in our culture. And there's so many examples of that. And I think, the other thing here, we really handle tough conversations with kindness, which is something that I really appreciate as well.
So, speaking of tough conversations, Cadillac uh, markets itself as the standard of the world, and it's trying to convince the world that it is the standard of the world. But its competitors would argue, and some manufacturers would say, that even in some items, technology, for example, other manufacturers have wrestled that title away from them. How much opportunity is there within Cadillac to regain that?
So I'll say a few things. I think when we look back at Cadillac's history, there's a reason that we were called the standard of the world. We are a company really built on innovation. We're 122 years old this year, and there's a reason that we're still here and we're here the way that we are. We're the first electric starter. We're the first reusable parts. We were the first with OnStar. I mean, there's like, if you go through our history, there's constant innovation. I will not deny that we definitely had a period of time where we lost our way and we were not the standard of the world. I think when you look at, I'll go back to our tagline as well. Our tagline isn't icons, it's be iconic. We are working on being iconic every single day in everything that we do. We are working on having the quality, having the products, doing the things. I think, I don't think that, we'll call ourselves the standard of the world right now. I think that we are working on having a customer experience and a product that is the standard of the world. And if you look at something like Celestic, which is a hand-built vehicle, has, the best technology, the best performance, really shows our EV future, you start to see where we're working on gaining our right back in that space.
And how far do you have to go?
I think when you look at EVs, Cadillac absolutely has the product portfolio and the positioning to be the luxury leader in EV. I think that's our rightful space. I think when you look at, we've got the Escalade IQ coming. That is absolutely the halo of our brand, personified as electric, and one of the most incredible vehicles I've ever seen. You've got Lyric that we see, it's found its ground and is the fastest growing nameplate in automotive. We have Optic, which is coming in to round out from Optic through Escalade IQ. We are going to have an absolutely incredible EV portfolio. I can't think of what I would want to do differently, and I'm so excited to have all these vehicles available.
EVs. When the pendulum swings as hard as it sometimes does in this automotive business, how difficult is it as a marketer to adjust? Because of course, we're now discussing it, and believe me, it has swung hard. I don't need to tell you. Just 2 years ago, you said we are coming with EVs as fast as possible, and we're going to meet consumer demand as fast as possible. And recent headlines, I don't need to repeat all of them, but of course it is focused around all three propulsion systems: hybrids, EVs, and internal combustion engines. And of course, plans have been adjusted in factories, and things at other manufacturers, not only GM, plans have been delayed. How hard is it to market when the consumer pendulum swings as fast as it does?
So a few things there. I think if you go back to 2019, 2020, if you looked at the EV growth curve that we were predicting then, it was lower than where we are now. So yes, we had this huge swing up, but we're still landing in a higher EV penetration than, when we were looking at the low highs. Now we're in a really good place. And so it's been really interesting because you do kind of have these, flash headlines and, this sort of sentiment that seems to be brewing that says, oh, EVs are slowing down. Well, they're slowing down from huge growth, and still growing faster than any other segment. So I think that's the first thing, that it's, there's a lot of noise right now, but EVs are still growing faster, not from us producing, from where consumer demand is. We have built our production system so that we can flex based on where consumer demand is. So honestly, we, can adjust on a month by month basis. And it's not that hard from either from a marketing perspective or even from a manufacturing perspective, because GM has set itself up to be ready for where consumers land. And that's really where we are and what's dictating what we do next. From a marketing perspective, it doesn't change the message. I think EVs are really exciting. And when consumers and the consumers that are ready for EVs, we're having I think this is like the beauty of like data and targeting and understanding consumers, right? And it's where all of the magic that we love happens. If you look at the West, we are very heavily marketing EVs because that's what consumers really want. In other markets, there's a mixed message of, we have a commercial running right now that has an XT4 and it has a Lyric. And so, or any version thereof of whatever vehicles per market are
different propulsion systems, basically.
Different propulsion
Right.
systems, different bodies, sedans, CUVs, SUVs. Like it depends on where that market is. And we're set up for that. That's literally the whole thing is basically music to our ears, because we're happy that EVs are growing at the rate they are and that Lyric is doing what it's doing, and Optic and Escalade IQ are coming at exactly the right time. And also for people who are not quite ready, we have the product portfolio for that. We're in a really good, strong position right now.
Well, I noticed some of your competitors recently have not taken long to switch their messaging. One competitor in particular now shows all three propulsion systems in their commercials, their national TV ads. Yeah. 6 months to a year ago, it would have only been one propulsion system, and it wouldn't have been the one that's been around for more than 100 years.
Yeah. So
it moved quickly.
Yes. No, and I think it is all of us responding to consumer demand. But I will say, if you look at Lyric right now, we have outsold, minus Tesla and Rivian, but if you talk about like the traditional competitors, we've outsold all of them combined in EVs the past several months. So I think, we're feeling good about where we are, and we're ready for whatever the consumer growth curve is, whether it's, back up as fast as it was, or it's on this very positive trajectory that it's on now. It's not going to go the other way.
Yeah, sure. As a data person, do you and as a marketer, do you look with a little bit of amazement and say, well, how can one of our competitors, you just mentioned it starts with a T, how can Tesla do as well as it's doing without marketing?
So I think, to say that Tesla is not marketing is a little bit
traditional marketing. TV ads.
Fair. It's an interesting thing, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about Tesla, but if I think that if you go back 10 years plus, Elon Musk was exactly what the automotive industry needed. We've all had EVs. I had a Prius like 20 years ago, right? So we've had EVs. The whole industry needed some sort of evangelism to get customers to understand EVs. And I think Elon really helped tip the scales in that way. He is the brand and he is the marketing. And so, we see that in its ebbs and flows as it goes. But I think that, without Elon, I don't think it would have worked the same way without traditional marketing. And obviously from a digital perspective, Tesla is very strong as marketers. And it's been a long time that it took them to build up to this point.
For sure. Back to Cadillac. Can you talk a little bit about the so-called influencer crowd that's out there, and maybe what role they might play within the Cadillac marketing universe? I was at Automotive News as a reporter. I was writing 20 years ago about the hip hop crowd loving the Escalade. What role does an influencer play for you?
Yeah, I think, where we are right now, and I wouldn't even call it typical influencer. We're really, like I said, we're working with people who really love the brand and can help us tell our story. Um, and so, like, for instance, Francis Tiafoe, who's one of the best tennis players in the world, is a friend of our brand, is a partner with our brand. And when we are working on a new launch, or when we're doing anything, we will work with him and have him help tell our story. I think if you go back to the Escalade IQ launch, we had Simu Liu as sort of the main character in the Escalade IQ commercial. And then we did some social posts with him as well. He did his first impression of the vehicle, which the way that he just off the cuff talks about a vehicle is absolutely amazing. So that was, I think, another really good example of when someone loves our product, we really love working together, and what that looks like. We also, I think, with Lyric and our Colors of Emotion campaign 2 summers ago, we're working with Labyrinth, who does all the music for Euphoria. And this is the perfect example of when it's working well. He custom composed two versions of one of his new songs that was just being launched for our Lyric commercials. He then starred in the Lyric commercials and also did some social storytelling. So I think we're really, we don't want to pay someone who doesn't love us to talk about our product. We want people who love us to work with us in a more authentic way.
You just launched Optic, and I want to go back to what you said earlier about its importance in the Cadillac electric lineup. It is the entry to the EV portfolio. It will act as such.
Yeah.
How will you market Optic?
There's a lot of different ways that we're going to market Optic. One of the things that we've really seen going back over the past 5 years when we look at launches, when we have the most success is when we have sort of an ecosystem of a campaign. It's something that we're seeing, and especially as you look at the younger customers that are coming into the brand, and we're just coming out of the upfronts in New York, but we all know that people aren't watching TV as much as or the same way as they used to. So when we look at how do we market a vehicle, when we have the best success, it's when we have a very multifaceted plan that really speaks to people in ways that are important to them, or that they, again, how they want to resonate with us. I think, let me give you one example of what I mean by that. When we launched Escalade in 2020, we called our campaign Escalade Everywhere. We also focus on outcomes everywhere. How do we make sure that we are where people want to be? One of the things that we did was we had an Escalade that with the AKG sound system, and we partnered with a Grammy-winning artist, and he had a concert in an airplane hangar. And we brought Escalades there. People thought they were just going to hear the music in the Escalade, but as it turned out, we had an actual concert there. And again, this was in 2020, so there were no concerts. It was at the height of COVID. It was something that really was a very special moment. And so that's the kind of thinking that we bring to every campaign that we do. Now, as we look at Optic, and we just revealed it in Paris a couple weeks ago. And when we look at Optic, this one we're really looking at, again, it's a more digital focus. We had some social elements that were really fun. And we worked with a lot of friends of the brand, partners that we work with to help us tell that story. And you're really going to see that with Optic moving through. We're going to tell that story with our friends of the brand, with the partners that we have. It will be very digital because, one thing that we're always looking at is how are people shopping for cars? How do they want to learn about cars? And that tends to really be digitally. And then we're looking at how we umbrella the message, because coming over the next year, we're going to have Optic, Lyric, and Escalade IQ, as well as our three-row EV coming out. And so when you look at that, I think we really want customers to understand we have the full breadth of EVs. Do you want this fun, sporty Optic, or do are you family person with two car seats? Sometimes when my family comes in town, we have three. And how are you assorting those throughout the vehicle? And we have the EV for you.
Speaking of Paris and the launch, what do you have to do to make sure Cadillac can compete on a world stage?
I think Cadillac is competing on a world stage. I think we are, we're already in 13 markets globally. And it's really interesting because we've done a lot of research, and the Cadillac story really resonates with people. It's very interesting as we went into, and, we talked a little bit about as a brand, we've gone through sort of a evolution, revolution of the brand. And going back to when I started this role and we moving into EV, what I noticed was we didn't have a clear view of who Cadillac was as an EV brand. And you see it with EV. People tend to go with trees and green, and it's just a very different feeling. Sometimes it's a sort of a lonely future with EVs when we look at the way that we all just almost tend to communicate EVs. So we went back and we said, who's Cadillac going to be moving into this EV future? And we started that process with asking the question, if Cadillac disappeared from the world, if it had never existed, what would be missing? And what was really incredible about this, and it's something that to me, I hold so dear for this brand, what would be missing is a symbol of the American dream and an American icon. And what an amazing place to hold as a brand, to be a symbol of the American dream. We've worked ourselves into the fabric of people's family stories. And what a Cadillac has represented, this moment of celebration, this moment of, I worked really hard and I've made it, is so beautiful. And that actually doesn't change as we move into EVs. So when we look at this brand, which is bold, it's optimistic, it's sophisticated, those things stay as we move into EVs. And so that's the way that we're continuing to present ourselves. We then, with that, that's how we came up with the tagline, Be Iconic. It was really hearkening back to what we've been our entire existence, within, movies, cars of royalty, president's vehicle. We did global research, and that same story existed for people, and the same messaging really resonated. So as we look at, now having vehicles that really make sense in Europe, as we look at Australia and New Zealand, as we're expanding with right-hand drive, as we look at our presence in the Middle East or China, we already have this place. We're coming from something that people have this innate love for, and really people tend to gravitate to the brand and want to be part of it, and feel our story.
As you look at, just here in the final few minutes, as you look at your rollout plan for the future, how much does experiential play in with event, play in with network? You just got done with upfronts. Where does the brand fit into all those places? And maybe in an order of importance, what's the most important for you?
I don't think we have an order of importance. I think what's really important to us is to connect with people and to create experiences, whether those are digital experiences or live and in person. And I think if you look at something like the US Open, or if you look at our driving experience at Spring Mountain, which is really incredible. If you look at where, in the WEC or IMSA and the racing experiences that we have, those are all moments of in-person connection. we've got to also be able to create those connections digitally with people. And then, we don't really look at like TV. Video is video. It's an extension across all the platforms, right? And so how and where are we connecting with people? And, I look at when are we being really relevant and when are we not being as relevant, and how do we work on being a brand that people want to interact with everywhere?
I want to go back to just the upfronts for a second. What did you learn in those conversations? I mean, this is on business radio, Sirius XM. So a lot of marketers, ad agency folks listening. What did you learn coming out of that?
Um, it's such an interesting time in the industry. What I'm really excited about is when we look at, especially, streaming is obviously proliferating and in a way consolidating as it's proliferating. But as we see consumer behavior shift to those platforms, I'm really excited about the innovation that we can have. So, like, let's not just create the same experience of TV now in streaming. And so I think that's the looking at the innovation of the future is what's really exciting to me, and where my conversations were. What are the new platforms that we have? What are the new ways that we can engage with customers? That was my focus for the week.
Is TV just limited to live sports anymore in terms of relevance?
TV is very much about like live sports is where most of the eyeballs are in real
Yeah.
time. So yeah.
Yeah. And everything else, as you said, is all about streaming.
Yeah, it's like
It's a
that's
new world.
yes. Yeah. It's where a
Yeah.
lot of our focus is.
One final thing. Your role is global. You once said that the biggest lesson that you learned from the pandemic, going back to where we started this conversation, is knowing what's important to your heart and your life and making sure you prioritize those who are important to you, including maybe an 8-month boy, and not fall into the easy trap of constant travel. How do you juggle your global role with your new responsibilities at home, Melissa?
So we are we're finding the balance. We as a family are traveling to Detroit for the Detroit Grand Prix. And so I'm just starting to, I think that work-life balance is very difficult, but I think that work-life integration is a necessity. So, we balance, and I think, right now when I travel, I try to keep it shorter, and we do a lot of video calls, and it's very funny to see his brain processing when mommy's flat versus when mommy's in 3D. He tries to touch the phone. He's like, "You're different today."
Right.
So, yeah, but it's very fun, and we're excited to show him the world. So I think it's really about integration.
Lastly, you mentioned following social media. Are you following the car mom?
No, how do I not know the car mom? Oh my gosh, I'm fixing that in 2 seconds.
We have had Kelly on the program talking about what it's like to be the car mom, and she goes and rates vehicles based on what it's like to be a mom. I think she announced on our show she's about to have her third child. So that changes what kind of vehicle that she needs. But
Yeah.
she's been in Buicks, she's been in Chevy, I think she's been in Cadillacs. Yeah, it is Kelly the car mom. So we're giving her a plug here, but you can definitely find her and probably get some tips for your new life, I'm
I
guessing.
love it. And Kelly the car mom, we have the right EV for you. That is amazing. I absolutely love it.
Congratulations on the launch of the new vehicle, the Optic, and thank you so much for sharing your story. Thanks for telling us about how the person who sold ice to an Eskimo arrived at Cadillac.
Thank you so much for having me, Jason.
Thank you, Melissa.